Hello, it's Mark Chris from Memorial Sloan Kettering, here to give my top 10 developments in thoracic oncology in the year 2020. Lord, it's been a crazy year, and I'm just happy to say that as we've found our way to grapple with COVID, we have continued to put forth great new developments in the field of thoracic oncology. And I know we've all been mightily distracted by the COVID pandemic, but I don't want to lose sight of the important developments that happened this year in the field of thoracic oncology. So starting with number 10, I think it's the emergence and FDA approval of two agents specifically targeting patients with RET-altered lung cancers, the drugs selpercatinib and pralsetinib. We have two agents very specific for RET, yielding response rates of approximately 50%. They're available to any patient that we find with RET-altered lung cancers. Number 9, in a similar vein, is the emergence of agents for MET-altered lung cancers. We now have FDA approval for capmatinib and inclusion in guidelines. Also other agents as well. We have crizotinib available, and also we have capmatinib in the NCCN guidelines for those lung cancers that have amplification of MET, high amplification of the MET gene. Unlike crizotinib, with response rates in the 30% range, tepotinib, capmatinib, response rates in the 50% range. So specific therapy for MET, both MET mutant and MET altered cancers. Number 8 would be the emergence of therapies for Her2 altered lung cancers and the addition to the NCCN guidelines of a second antibody drug conjugate, trastuzumab deruxtecan, for Her2 mutant and HER2 amplified lung cancers. A lot of experience in breast. The drugs are very effective, drugs that we can handle. And now with the addition of trastuzumab deruxtecan to adotrastuzumab emtansine, you have two agents, antibody drug conjugates for patients with lung cancers that are HER2 mutant or HER2 amplified based on the data that Dr. Lee has presented. Number 7, many wonder why this should be 7 and not higher, would be the emergence of specific targeted agents for KRAS. It's been a dream of most thoracic oncologists that we'd have drugs for KRAS. We finally have at least 2 drugs marching toward FDA approval, not quite there yet, but getting close. Accelerated approval is in the offing for these and breakthrough designation. The drugs are sotorasib and adagrasib. The agents lead to durable, meaningful responses for patients, and I think how to integrate them into the care of patients is going to be our challenge going forward this year and in the years to come. And all these developments lead to number 6, and that is the emergence of NGS testing. It's absolutely clear now that NGS testing is a standard of care. It needs to be done for all patients. I'd urge it be done as soon as the diagnosis of lung cancer is suspected to help plan therapy, help in diagnosis, and help choose the best treatment sequence for patients. We have very good tests. We have both blood and tissue testing that can do this. And in addition to the diagnostic capabilities, what we're seeing now with comprehensive NGS testing is it can be used to guide therapy, not just to choose drugs, but to see whether or not drugs are working. Both in the advanced setting, many clinical trials underway now looking at intensifying therapy when CellFree DNA is present after treatment with a given therapy, and also in the locally advanced setting. I think the work of Max Dean of Stanford clearly has paved the way here, using CellFree DNA to guide therapeutics. So if after you've given a definitive therapy, CellFree DNA is still present, or also, as Dr. Dean has pointed out, if CellFree DNA is present at diagnosis, it indicates a higher degree of risk and would want us to give our most intensive therapies for those patients. The last great thing that's happened is these standard NGS tests the Foundation Medicine ones, for example, are now the companion diagnostics that are FDA approved for choosing our targeted therapies, which now are available for probably half of patients with lung adenocarcinomas. Again, while any individual target may be a small percentage, when you put them all together, it's a huge percentage, and it justifies doing NGS testing on everybody. What's our number 5 development? And that is, I'll call it the reemergence or the rediscovery of chemotherapy. I think we've seen that chemotherapy is a very important complementary therapy to immunotherapeutics. We've had data for many years giving it with anti-PD-1 and PD-L1 agents. This year we saw data adding chemotherapy to ipilimumab and nivolumab. Again, chemotherapy, a regimen that has fallen out of favor in many respects, very helpful when given with immunotherapeutics in the right situation. The other development were 2 papers in the Journal of Clinical Oncology adding chemotherapy to the targeted therapies, gefitinib or erlotinib, in patients with EGFR mutant disease, in both cases showing improvements in progression-free and overall survival, and leading the editorialist from those 2 manuscripts to say that adding chemotherapy to gefitinib or erlotinib as initial therapy is now a new standard of care. Who would have thought? Number 4, I think it's the emergence of neoadjuvant approaches, particularly with neoadjuvant immunotherapeutics. This year, the IASLC has published a comprehensive work detailing how pathologic specimens can be assessed for pathologic response. And also many pieces of data published and reported now how immunotherapeutics alone, data from the Lung Cancer Mutation Consortium, for example, or immunotherapeutics and chemotherapy, data from Provencio and from Catherine Hsu at Columbia, showing very high rates of pathologic complete response and major pathologic response, which translates into survival benefit for those patients. And an early report from a phase 3 trial comparing nivolumab and chemotherapy to chemotherapy alone, again showing an increase in pathologic complete response rate, which in all the past literature translates into an improvement in overall control. I think we're going to see more neoadjuvant therapy, immunotherapeutics, and given with chemotherapy as well. Number 3, additional information that combining a checkpoint inhibitor with concurrent radiotherapy in a treatment program leads to long-term results. This year at the ESMO meeting, 4-year survival data and progression-free survival data, more importantly, was reported. So in the original trial, adding durvalumab to concurrent chemorads, we now have data that adding that drug to our best regimens of concurrent chemotherapy and radiation improves progression-free survival by 15% at 4 years. That is getting closer and closer to what we're really looking for, a long progression-free survival and perhaps cure, and more data at the ESMO meeting this year that that's going to happen. So this is now a standard of care, and we got a reassurance that it's an important one. Number 2, and that is the emergence of targeted therapy of osimertinib in patients with EGFR mutant lung cancers that have had complete resections of their cancer. That data, very, very potent, shows that improvements in progression-free survival, the goal of this trial, were very dramatic for all stages. That has now been added to the NCCN guidelines and has now been approved by FDA. So for the first time, we have an approved therapy for stage 1B lung cancers. We also have an approved targeted therapy. I think that's going to open the door for more and more testing of targeted therapies in this neoadjuvant and adjuvant setting. And number 1, bending the progression-free survival curve for patients with stage 4 lung cancers. In the paper reported by Roy Herbst in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, what you see is comparing pembrolizumab to docetaxel, persistent improvements in progression-free survival out to 4 years and plus. That can translate into a cure. And who would have thought that patients with metastatic disease, in this case in a second-line setting, would have long, not just remissions, but remissions that don't seem to end, and maybe the possibility of curing these patients. I think that's the most dramatic piece of data that I've seen this year and gives us the greatest encouragement. And so in summary, I think we've had an amazing year. We've had hints that we can clearly improve progression-free survival and perhaps cure in patients with both locally advanced and metastatic disease. And the paper in the New England Journal a few months ago showing that for really the very first time, mortality has been decreased in all patients with lung cancer, and the reason is the therapies we give. So great news that our therapy impacts patients in a very meaningful way. We have a lot more work to do, and we should be encouraged, though, by the deluge of data that we've had this past year, that we're going to do even better, not just to lengthen life, but to cure our patients with lung cancers, both locally advanced and metastatic.